Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. He lost everything, his wife, his daughter, his world, so he vanished into the wild, seeking silence. But peace doesn't last when greed comes knocking. Now, one man must fight back, off the grid, on his land, and on his terms. Welcome to the war they never saw coming. I never planned to live like this, but 5 years ago, I stopped making plans altogether. The day I buried my wife and daughter, something inside me just shut off like a bad breaker. I quit my job as a structural engineer, sold the house, the car, the furniture, everything but a duffel bag, a rifle, and a box of notebooks. I took the insurance money and bought 100 acres of raw, high-altitude land in the Bitterroot Mountains of Montana, 20 miles from the nearest town. No paved roads, no power lines, no damn people, just pine trees, black bears, silence, and what was left of me. I built the house with my own hands. 2 years with nothing but sweat, calluses, and a stubborn streak that hadn't died with the rest of me. Solar panels on the roof, backup diesel generator buried under the hill, wood stove in the center of the main room. I dug a well, installed a filtration system, stocked the cellar. I built a hunting tower a few yards from the back door, and I can track a deer across a ridge blindfolded. I don't need anyone, not a soul. Most people think they want solitude until it stops being poetic and starts being real. Until you go 3 weeks without hearing another voice and you start talking to your damn shovel. But I needed the quiet, the stillness. I wasn't escaping the world. I just didn't want to be part of it anymore. Things stayed that way for a long time. I grew my own food, canned what I could, hunted, fished, traded in town when I had to. The nearest humans were a good 15 miles downhill, loggers mostly, and one retired math teacher who brewed his own moonshine and never wore shoes. We got along fine because we didn't bother each other. That's the key out here. Boundaries. You respect a man's fence, he respects yours. Then, about 6 months ago, something changed. It started with a new road. Not a logging path or old Forest Service trail. No, this one had gravel, reflectors, drainage ditches. I came across it by accident while out checking trap lines. It cut clean through what used to be unmarked woods about 4 miles south of me and led straight to a series of bright white survey flags dotting the hillside like acne on a teenager. 2 weeks later, I heard bulldozers. I hiked up to a ridge where I could get a clean line of sight. Sure enough, there were construction crews crawling all over the western edge of the valley. Big prefab homes on truck beds, concrete foundations poured from mixers, engineers in hard hats pointing at iPads. It looked like a virus, spreading outwards. Didn't think much of it. I've seen developers come and go over the years. Usually they underestimate the weather, overpay for labor, and run out of money before the second winter. Still, I started seeing more traffic on the old forest road. SUVs, trucks with license plates from California and Oregon, the occasional delivery van that clearly took a wrong turn. I didn't like it, but my land was well marked. My title was clean. Let them build their shiny matchstick neighborhoods. Just stay out of my woods. Then came the signs. I was hauling firewood one morning when I noticed a brand new metal plaque nailed to a cedar tree right at the turnoff to my access road. Evergreen Summit, HOA jurisdiction, community standards enforced. It had a logo with a pine tree and a rising sun, like someone had taken a yoga studio's website and slapped it onto a boundary marker. Underneath, all visitors must register with the association. That sign wasn't on my land, but it was damn close. A few days later, another one appeared, this time directly across from my gate. Then a third, mounted on a stake with a laminated flyer fluttering beneath it. Join our community. Monthly dues $240. Voting rights. Be part of the future. That's when I realized this wasn't some clueless subdivision with dreams of being Aspen. Someone had decided that this mountain belonged to them. And judging by the real estate names on the trucks, Evergreen Lifestyle Properties, they had plans for everything, including people like me. I ignored the signs, pulled them up when they got too close, and went about my life. But I knew it was only a matter of time before they made their next move. People like that, they don't understand no. They see land and think rules, see fences and think negotiations. They mistake silence for weakness. That was their first mistake. The second came the day the black SUV pulled into my clearing. The black SUV came crawling up my access road like it owned the place. tires crackling over gravel I'd laid myself, suspension too clean for mountain terrain. I watched it from the edge of the tree line, binoculars in one hand, coffee in the other. They stopped just short of my gate. Smart move. And two figures stepped out. A man in slacks and loafers holding a leather portfolio like it was a damn weapon, and a woman in a mint green pantsuit, sunglasses too big for her face, tablet clutched to her chest like a defibrillator. The moment she stepped forward, I knew exactly who she was. She didn't knock. She didn't call out. She stood there, scanning the clearing like a land surveyor inspecting termite damage. I figured if they wanted to talk, they'd better show some manners. I walked up slow, rifle slung across my back, and leaned on the fence post. "Help you folks with something?" I asked, real polite. "Good morning," the woman said, too brightly. "I'm Kimberly Cairns, president of the Evergreen Summit Homeowners Association. This is my associate, Tom." Tom gave a meek little nod, already sweating through his shirt. I said nothing, just stared. Kimberly took that as permission to launch into her pitch. "We're here to welcome you to our growing community. You may have seen the signage. We've expanded HOA boundaries to include this region of the Ridge, and we're so excited to bring everyone under a unified vision. Evergreen is about harmony, safety, and shared values. And we're offering early integration for existing residents like yourself, which includes discounted dues for the first 6 months, as well as voting rights in upcoming association elections." She handed me a folder with a cover sheet that read, "Evergreen Covenant Agreement." I didn't take it. "You'll need to bring your property into compliance, of course," she added, flipping through her tablet. "That includes fencing materials, fire mitigation, visual cohesion, your roofs unpainted, for example, and obviously no more exposed utility structures. And livestock aren't permitted outside of screened enclosures. We're happy to provide a list of approved vendors." "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice level, "this here is private land, not part of any development. I bought it outright 5 years ago." "It's not within your jurisdiction." Kimberly's smile twitched like a dying battery. "I understand there might be confusion, but our zoning map includes this parcel now, per our updated annexation documentation filed with the county. All lots within the perimeter fall under HOA regulation unless formally exempted." Tom offered a sheet from his folder, a blurry map with a red circle drawn in what looked like crayon. I didn't even glance at it. "You'll want to double-check your records," I said. "This land predates your HOA by decades. It was never subdivided, never part of a community plan, and my deed's as clear as a mountain stream. So, unless you've got a court order stapled to that tablet, I suggest you take your early integration offer and walk it right back down the road you came up." Kimberly blinked, then laughed lightly, as if I'd just made a joke at a wine mixer. "There's no need for hostility, Mr. Hudson, Jake Hudson." "Well, Mr. Hudson, let me assure you, our intention is to elevate the entire Evergreen lifestyle. Resistance to community integration typically stems from misunderstanding, not opposition. I'll go ahead and schedule a compliance review for next Thursday. If you change your mind, we'd love to have you attend our next HOA mixer. It's vegan-friendly." "Don't come back," I said. She took that surprisingly well, smiled, nodded, then reached into her handbag and, without asking, snapped a photo of my house. "For records," she said, then turned on her heel like she owned the dirt under her feet. Tom scuttled after her, muttering something about bylaws. I watched them go. The SUV reversed awkwardly down the slope, nearly backing into a pine. They were gone for now. But I knew they'd be back. HOA people are like ticks. If they get their teeth in, they don't let go without blood. 3 days later, it arrived by registered mail, a thick envelope, official letterhead, legalese crawling over every page like ants on a carcass. According to them, I owed $18,500 in cumulative fees and fines, $2,000 for an unauthorized perimeter fence, $5,000 for non-compliant exterior structure, $3,000 for environmental negligence, and the rest for vague nonsense like regionally disruptive architectural choices. No court stamp, no citations, just threats of additional action upon non-payment. I read every word, then slowly tore the whole thing in half, fed it into the wood stove, and lit a match. The smoke it made was thin, bitter, and fast. That night, I went outside and added another lock to the gate, reinforced the trail cameras, refreshed the bear traps on the northern slope just in case anyone got clever. because if this was how they started, I had no doubt things were about to get a whole lot worse. It started with the cameras. At first, I thought they were trail cams, cheap motion sensor junk some weekend hunter had nailed to a tree in the wrong place. But no. These were black domed, solar-powered surveillance units mounted high on aluminum poles, aimed directly at the bend in my road and my main clearing. I counted 3 in total, installed overnight like mushrooms after a rainstorm. One had the HOA logo stenciled right onto the casing, neat as a brand on livestock. I stood at the edge of my property, arms crossed, staring up at one of them as it silently watched me back. I didn't touch it, not yet. I'm no stranger to bait. Instead, I hiked a loop through my own forest, checking for signs of foot traffic. I found tire tracks, not from my truck. These were ATV marks, deep, fresh, and heading up from the direction of the new roads they'd carved out during development. They hadn't breached the main gate yet, but they were close. I didn't like it. So I did what any man with a little paranoia and a lot of free time would do. I dug out the extra trail cams I'd kept boxed up in the storage shed, mounted 6 of them across different angles, and linked them to the off-grid surveillance rig I'd built last winter during the blackout months. If they wanted to watch me, I'd watch them right back. I didn't have to wait long. The very next afternoon, I was working on the greenhouse roof. Storm damage from the last wind front when I heard engines. High-pitched, low torque, too loud for dirt bikes. 2 ATVs came roaring up the access road like they were scouting for the next episode of a reality show. They stopped short of my main gate, helmets off before the dust even settled. 2 men. One heavy-set bald with a neon yellow vest and mirrored glasses. The other younger, lean, full of piss and attitude, arms crossed like he was auditioning for a SWAT poster. Both had HOA patches on their sleeves. Evergreen Enforcement Division, that was new. I climbed down slow, wiping my hands on a rag, and walked up to the gate. Didn't open it. Just stood on my side, letting the fence be what it was, a very polite barrier to stupidity. Afternoon, I said flatly. Mr. Hudson, the bald one called out. We're here for a perimeter inspection. Of what? I asked, already knowing the answer. Standard compliance sweep, said the younger one. We need to verify that your external structures meet regional fire codes, soil impact criteria, and aesthetic consistency with the Evergreen Community Charter. That's a lot of words for we're trespassing, I replied. We're authorized, said the bald one. Section 9 of the covenant allows for property access under probable cause. I reached over and tapped the gate with one knuckle. Pretty sure you'll need to go back and reread that covenant. Because this property isn't in your jurisdiction, and I sure as hell didn't sign anything that lets rent-a-cops sniff around my tool shed. They exchanged a look, and the younger one took a step forward, like that was going to impress me. Sir, refusal to cooperate can be escalated to legal intervention. That's so. I unslung the rifle from my shoulder and rested it gently against the inside of the gate. I didn't aim it, didn't threaten, just let it be seen. Let me be very clear, I said. You step 1 boot past that fence, I will treat it as unlawful entry. Not with force, yet, but with cameras, records, and every legal recourse I have. And just so you're aware, I have footage of your ATV tracks on my land from 2 nights ago. So, unless you're here to apologize and turn yourselves in, I'd suggest you put those little engines in reverse and bounce the hell out. The younger guy opened his mouth like he was about to protest. Then he looked at the rifle again. Looked at my face, and decided better of it. They left. I watched them disappear in a cloud of dust, waited 5 minutes, then pulled the memory card from my closest cam and backed up the footage. Full HD, time-stamped, both faces clear as day. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. That night, around 2 a.m., the generator kicked off. I knew the sound well, the slow stutter, followed by silence, then the faint warning buzz from the backup inverter. I rolled out of bed, pulled on boots, grabbed the flashlight, and went to check. The fuel line had been sliced, clean, surgical. No claw marks, no chew damage, just a deliberate human-made cut. Someone had sabotaged it. The well pump was next. By morning, I discovered it wasn't drawing anymore. The intake pipe had been jammed with what looked like insulation foam and gravel. Took me hours to clear it, and while I was at it, I found a new sign posted at the edge of the Southern Trail, a laminated warning mounted on rebar. Evergreen Summit Protected Habitat, access restricted, violators will be prosecuted, my land, my woods. They were declaring it theirs. I didn't call the sheriff, not yet. He's an old friend, but I knew what he'd say. Do you have proof they did it? And all I had was circumstantial so far. The law out here moves slow, too slow. So I set the traps. I'm not talking bear snares or punji pits. That's illegal and stupid. I mean subtle stuff, pressure plates with dye packs, trail cams rigged with thermal sensors, remote alarms. I rewired the perimeter floodlights to auto-trigger if someone so much as twitched in the brush. I posted signs of my own, private land, no trespassing, no HOA, no exceptions. And then I waited, because I knew damn well the next move wouldn't be subtle. The envelope was cream-colored, thicker than usual, and had the weight of something meant to screw you sideways. It arrived with the weekly delivery drop from the general store down in Ridgetop, a town I visited maybe once a month, and only because canned beans didn't restock themselves. The clerk handed it to me with a grimace, like she knew she was passing me a coiled rattlesnake. Inside was a copy of a formal complaint filed with the Ravalli County Planning Office. The heading read, Petition for Annexation and Compliance Review, Evergreen Summit HOA Expansion Proposal. The language was full of bureaucratic perfume, but the meaning was simple. They wanted my land, and they were trying to do it through paper. They claimed my parcel fell within a revised boundary assessment of Evergreen Summit, citing new zoning overlays that had been proposed and preliminarily accepted by the local land board. My address, my actual federally recorded GPS-verified been here for 5 years address, was listed as Lot 14B, Zone 3, non-conforming structure pending reintegration. I stared at the words so long the ink started to blur. I called the county office immediately and got bounced between 3 departments before a clerk named Miranda finally admitted, yes, the petition had been submitted. No, it wasn't approved. Yes, a public hearing was scheduled. No, they hadn't notified me yet. She sounded embarrassed, like she'd found out her department had just pissed in the town well. I thanked her and hung up. Then I threw on my coat, grabbed the deed, the old paper maps, the notarized survey from when I first bought the land, and drove into town like hell was chasing me. The county administration building was one of those modern monstrosities. Glass, brushed metal, someone clearly trying to make bureaucracy look sexy. It didn't work. The reception desk had a plastic fern and a sign-in tablet that crashed twice before accepting my name. A young guy in khakis and a checkered shirt took my documents into a back room. I waited 45 minutes in a molded plastic chair while the lobby TV blared farm subsidies and weather updates. Eventually, a senior planner named Denise came out holding my file like it was a dead possum. "You're Jake Hudson?" she asked. In the flesh. She cleared her throat and motioned me into a small conference room. So, there's been some confusion. That's never what you want to hear from someone holding your legal existence. She spread out their copy of the zoning map, overlaid with blueprints from Evergreen Summit. And sure enough, my land was outlined in red, tagged with a handwritten note. Annexation candidate. Verify tract history. In their system, my plot appeared to overlap with a subdivision lot, Lot 14B, but it didn't. Not in real life. The problem was digital. Apparently, when the Evergreen developers submitted their subdivision plan, they used satellite overlays that didn't account for old survey lines properly. Their software had lazily assumed that anything unzoned was fair game, and no one caught it. Except now, it was in motion. On paper, I was a floating island in their HOA swamp, and if I didn't do something fast, they'd use that illusion to make it real. I contacted Tom Ellis, a retired land surveyor I knew from the next county over. He once helped a rancher fight off a telecom company trying to build a cell tower on his hayfield, and he had zero patience for bureaucratic stupidity. I emailed him the documents. Within an hour, he called back, laughing. "Jake," he said, "they're trying to zone your land using a parcel number that doesn't exist in your plat. It's a ghost lot, but they'll get away with it if nobody raises hell." I told him to bring his boots and a measuring wheel. We were going to court. We filed an emergency injunction to halt any administrative action based on the Evergreen submission. Tom prepared a full historical overlay of my land boundaries, including physical survey stakes, GPS data, and historical deeds going back to the 1930s. I brought copies of the title transfer, the construction permits for the house, even the old photos of the clearing before I built on it. The county judge scheduled an expedited hearing. HOA lawyers showed up in designer suits, spouting jargon and presenting a digital model they clearly hadn't double-checked. They argued I was within their intended growth zone and therefore subject to compliance planning under conditional annexation. I let Tom do the talking. He destroyed them. Point by point, document by document, he showed how their boundaries were speculative, their parcel ID system flawed, and their Lot 14B was actually a rocky hillside that no one had ever owned, parceled, or paid taxes on. My land, meanwhile, was legally distinct and self-contained. When it was over, the judge ruled in my favor, emphatically. He issued an order barring Evergreen Summit HOA from any claim, action, or communication implying jurisdiction over my property. He cited attempted misrepresentation, boundary tampering, and failure to notify a lawful landowner. That should have ended it, but I've been alive long enough to know. People like Karens don't stop just because a judge tells them to. They just find a new way to come at you sideways. The ruling came down on a Wednesday, clean and final. I framed a copy of it and hung it next to the fireplace, just to remind myself that sometimes the system actually works. I should have known better than to celebrate. 3 days later, a white envelope was taped to my gate. No postage, no return address. Inside was a flyer printed on glossy paper, complete with color-coded sections, bullet points, and clip art families smiling beneath a logo that read, Evergreen Summit Annual Community Festival, celebrating our unified vision. I nearly missed the small print at the bottom. Environmental tours and shared access demonstration hike to include surrounding lands, such as the Hudson Ridge View Zone. I read it 3 times. Hudson Ridge View Zone. They'd given my land a nickname like it was a feature in some eco-theme park. No mention of private ownership, no asterisk, no note about the court order, just an assumption that I was part of the show. I called the sheriff, not to whine, just to inform. He sighed and told me they'd keep a unit nearby that weekend, but don't do anything dramatic. I thanked him and got to work doing something dramatic. By Friday morning, I'd welded together a steel frame gate from scrap pipe and bolted it across the main road leading into my southern clearing. Added a brand new padlock, motion sensors, and a fresh set of no trespassing signs in both English and Spanish. I even laminated copies of the court ruling and stapled them to wooden stakes, just in case someone needed to brush up on property law during their hike. Saturday came bright and early. Too early. At 9 a.m., I heard the rumble of engines echoing down the valley. Vans, SUVs, a few hybrids coughing up dust as they navigated the dirt switchbacks toward the trailhead near my land's edge. I climbed into the tower I'd built years ago for deer watching and got eyes on them. It was a convoy, at least 30 people, adults in matching evergreen shirts, kids with little drawstring bags, one of those portable speaker carts blasting something soft and fluty. In the center of it all, like the queen bee she imagined herself to be, was Kimberly Cairns, striding up the path with the smug confidence of someone who'd never been punched in the mouth by reality. They reached the gate by 10. A volunteer, young guy with a clipboard and too much sunscreen, approached the chain link, rattled it, and turned back to the group. I watched through binoculars as Karen marched to the front, stopped short, and read my laminated ruling. Her lips twisted into something halfway between confusion and offense. Then she pulled out her phone. I figured I had maybe 5 minutes before things escalated. I walked down slow, deliberately, rifle slung low but visible. I stopped 10 feet from the gate, just inside the line, arms folded. "Morning," I said. Karen forced a smile like it was a mask glued to her skull. "Mr. Hudson, we weren't expecting such a display." "This is private land," I said. "You were told." "In court," she held up her phone. "We're not entering. We're just observing from the boundary. This is a public awareness initiative. We're highlighting the importance of environmental integration across shared ridge space." "There is no shared space here," I said. "You don't have a foot of legal ground inside that gate." Her smile dropped. "Well," she said, voice tightening, "we have every right to hold our festival. The community supports it. And if you're going to make this difficult..." I held up a hand. "Karen, don't." Behind her, someone was filming. Another volunteer was passing out branded reusable water bottles. I stepped aside and pointed to the court documents. "This is not a debate. This is law. You bring one person past that gate, I call the sheriff, and I file a harassment charge against you personally, not the HOA. You." I leaned forward just enough for the mic on her phone to catch it clearly. "You want a viral moment? You'll get one. But it won't be the kind your board will want on the Evergreen Facebook page." Her eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that. She turned back to her group, gestured toward a modified route, and led them away with the same tone you'd use when redirecting a school field trip from a closed museum. But not before two of her volunteers took pictures of my gate, my signs, and me. I smiled wide and gave them a thumbs up. Might as well help with the framing. The sheriff's deputy showed up an hour later, already annoyed. "Got a call from someone claiming you threatened a community function," he said. "Got a copy of a restraining order taped to a steel gate," I replied. He chuckled, rubbed his temples, and said, "I'm just here so nobody sues the county. Try not to shoot anyone." "Only if they knock first," I said. The deputy stayed for 20 minutes, chatted with a few of the festival attendees, then left with a shrug. I made another pot of coffee and returned to my tower. Watched the rest of the festivities from a distance. Balloons, music, Karen's speech through a megaphone about cohesive ecological futures. I could barely hear it over the wind. That evening, I found a new sign zip-tied to a tree about 15 feet past my boundary line. A thin plastic rectangle that read, "Future Expansion Area, Evergreen Outlook Trail Phase 2. I tore it down, broke it in half, and tossed the pieces into the fire pit. They weren't finished, but neither was I. The sign wasn't the last straw. It was the fuse. 3 days after their festival, I started getting knocks at my gate. Not from HOA volunteers this time. These were strangers, hikers, couples, a group of college kids with trail maps printed from some online forum. One guy even asked where the Hudson Ridge Overlook was, like I was a national park ranger giving tours. Apparently, Evergreen had updated their website with a new digital brochure. My land was now featured as part of a future trail loop and labeled as Public Interest Land Pending Community Partnership. No legal language, no disclaimers. Just pretty photos taken, without my consent, from a drone. That same day, a man in a gray suit showed up claiming to be from the Montana Department of Natural Resources and Conservation. He waved a laminated badge and asked if I had the permits for my well and pond. When I asked for ID, he refused. When I asked again, more firmly, he muttered something about statutory compliance under public complaint, then left. He never filed anything. I checked. 2 nights later, the same gray truck I'd seen earlier parked just past my tree line. I watched from the tower as someone got out, crouched near the pump shed, and stayed there for a few minutes. By the time I made it down with a flashlight, they were gone. I found a zip tie around one of the intake valves, meant to pinch it shut until pressure built up and blew the line. It didn't work, but it told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just harassment, it was strategy. Pressure by 1,000 pinpricks. I called my lawyer. His name was Philip Ross, mid-50s, sharp-eyed, ex-military, with a deep hatred of bad paperwork and people who abuse power. I emailed him everything: court documents, drone photos, visitor reports, the fake badge incident. He called back an hour later. "We're escalating," he said. "There's enough here for a federal land rights case, especially if there's evidence of collusion between the HOA and any state agency." "I think there is," I replied. "One of the DNR guys is related to Karen Cairns. Her cousin, I think." That was all he needed to hear. Ross filed 2 motions, one for a cease and desist against Evergreen HOA for continued misrepresentation of private land, and another for an inquiry into administrative overreach involving state employees and personal connections. He brought in a federal land use attorney out of Missoula who specialized in property disputes involving quasi-governmental organizations like HOAs. While the legal gears began to turn, I fortified the homestead. I installed a new locking gate, reinforced the tower, upgraded the motion sensors to infrared. I even set up a separate satellite uplink just for live backups of my surveillance feeds, because if someone was going to sabotage my tech, I wanted the footage saved 3 states away. A week later, I received a formal letter on Evergreen Summit HOA letterhead. It was worded carefully. No threats, no direct demands, but it invited me to attend a mediation session regarding ongoing community concerns. The location, their new community center, built less than a mile from my southern border. I laughed, then shredded it. The next morning, I found a sheriff's cruiser parked at the bottom of my access road. Deputy Monroe, same one from the festival incident, stepped out, palms raised in peace. "Got a call," he said, "about unauthorized fencing on public use paths." "There are no public use paths," I replied. "You've seen the court order." He sighed. "I know, but I'm required to respond." Karen's persistent. You think she forged a permit? Wouldn't be the first time someone got creative with boundary lines. I showed him the footage from the night before. Someone in an evergreen shirt removing one of my boundary markers and replacing it with their own. He watched silently, jaw tight. "Send me that," he said, "and keep backups." I already had 10. That night, Ross called again. They tried to file for an emergency injunction claiming your fencing is blocking a wildlife corridor, he said. But their map is based on doctored overlays. We caught it. I'm sending counterfilings tomorrow. I paused. You think they're desperate? They're getting there, but desperate people are dangerous. He was right. The next move wasn't a lawsuit or a flyer, it was a fire. At 2 a.m., one of my motion sensors lit up the east clearing. I grabbed my rifle and ran. What I found was a patch of dry brush, blazing low and fast. Someone had poured accelerant along the tree line and lit a fuse. It didn't take. Too damp from last week's rain. But it left black scars in the grass and a trail of half-burned cloth strips leading back to the edge of the HOA zone. I called the fire department. They showed up in under 20 minutes. The sheriff came too. So did the news. By noon, the footage was viral. Off-grid home targeted in land war blaze. Reporters camped at the county line. Karen released a statement calling it an unfortunate misunderstanding. But it was too late. They'd crossed a line. And now the feds were watching. It was strange how quiet the forest got after everything caught fire, literally and figuratively. The smoke cleared, the scorched patch at the edge of my land turned gray and still, and for a few days, it almost felt like they were regrouping. But I wasn't stupid enough to think silence meant surrender. It meant recalibration. The news coverage lit a fire of its own. Local stations picked up the story first, then regional outlets. The words "private landowner under siege" made for easy headlines, especially with a backdrop of drone footage showing my remote compound and a photo of Karen standing next to a suspiciously similar expansion map that had already been disproven in court. I didn't speak to the press. I let the footage speak for itself. Burn marks, busted gate, legal filings, and a slow, clear zoom on the no trespassing sign that had been torn down hours before the fire. Meanwhile, Philip Ross was in overdrive. He filed a formal federal complaint under the right to enjoyment of property clause and brought in a new ally, a federal attorney named Maya Shin, specializing in landowner protections against non-governmental overreach. Her voice was calm, professional, and so sharp it could gut a committee hearing in 3 sentences. While they prepped the federal case, I got another visitor. This time, it wasn't Karen. It was the Department of Natural Resources again. 2 men, with real IDs this time, real jackets, and a whole lot of attitude. They claimed they were here for a compliance inspection of my well and gray water runoff systems. Said they'd received multiple environmental complaints regarding possible contamination and unpermitted structures. I laughed. You mean the same well that's been in my name since 2018? The one that passed county inspection and was never in your jurisdiction? One of them, Barton, didn't even blink. We're here on official review orders. If you refuse access, we'll be forced to escalate. Please escalate, I said, pulling out a copy of the cease and desist order. This land is private. It's not part of Evergreen Summit. I've already proven that in court. If you step 1 foot past this fence without a warrant, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. He gave me a long, dead stare. You're making this more difficult than it needs to be. That's funny, I said. I was just thinking the same thing. They left, but not before one of them dropped a thin metal rod just off the edge of my property line. An old trick, a sensor left behind to later claim data collection. I dug it up, tossed it in a steel barrel, and burned it. Ross and Maya were furious. They immediately filed for a judicial review, citing abuse of authority and retaliatory targeting. They also opened a Freedom of Information request to dig into communications between Evergreen Summit and the department. Within 48 hours, they found something. A series of emails from Karen's personal account to a junior field inspector at the DNR who turned out to be her nephew, containing community reports and requests for discreet inspection visits. In one of them, she actually wrote, "If we can't get him to comply by code, we'll drown him in inspections." Maya called it a smoking gun. That same week, the Fed sent a letter to Evergreen Summit HOA, notifying them of an impending investigation for abuse of authority, harassment, and unlawful surveillance. Karen responded exactly how I expected, by doubling down. She hosted a press conference at the new HOA clubhouse, wore her best beige suit, and stood behind a podium with a banner reading "Community First," claimed she was the real victim of a defamation campaign by a lone radical survivalist. Even cried. For the cameras, but something had changed. The media didn't buy it. A local journalist pulled county records showing how Evergreen Summit had been quietly trying to absorb dozens of parcels under the radar, including several with pre-existing residents. A land grab, plain and simple. My case just happened to be the one that got too loud to hide. And then came the break I didn't expect. One of Karen's own board members, a man named Stephen Patel, resigned and went public. Claimed the HOA president had pushed members to fund security enhancements and private reconnaissance services to monitor and discourage non-compliant holdouts. He even admitted they'd hired an off-books contractor to install remote surveillance units. Ross nearly choked on his coffee when he read the statement. "That's conspiracy," he said, "and evidence tampering. We're not just in civil court anymore. We're in federal criminal territory." I nodded slowly. Good. That night, as the sun set over the ridge and the generator hummed beside me, I stood on my porch, watching the wind curl through the trees. For the first time in months, I didn't feel surrounded. I felt fortified. They'd tried lawsuits, sabotage, gaslighting, and intimidation. Now they'd finally stepped into territory they couldn't control, a courtroom where I wasn't alone. And tomorrow, they'd face the consequences. The courthouse was packed. Not with press. They'd been pushed to the side of the building, but with people, locals, property owners, and a few familiar faces from town who'd once avoided eye contact with me at the general store, now stood shoulder to shoulder in the gallery. I guess everyone loves a reckoning. Karen sat at the defendant's table, flanked by two lawyers in expensive suits that looked a size too big for the dignity they were trying to wear. She kept her face calm, eyes forward, but her fingers tapped nonstop on the wood. I recognized that rhythm. It was the beat of someone trying to control an avalanche with sheer willpower. Ross opened strong. He didn't need theatrics, just facts. He laid out the timeline, the illegal expansion efforts, the forged public trail plans, the drone footage, the targeted inspections, the fire. He read Karen's own emails aloud, letting each word hang in the air like smoke. When he got to the part about the hired surveillance and the internal sabotage, you could feel the room shift. Maya followed with the federal charges: conspiracy to interfere with private land use, unlawful surveillance, attempted regulatory manipulation. The judge didn't interrupt once. Karen's side tried to argue community interest, claimed the HOA acted in good faith to protect regional standards, but every piece of evidence said otherwise. And when Stephen Patel took the stand and confirmed everything under oath, it was over. The verdict came the next morning. Evergreen Summit HOA was found guilty of unlawful encroachment, abuse of regulatory processes, conspiracy to defraud a landowner, and harassment. Karen was personally charged with perjury, unlawful surveillance, and coercion of a public official. Her nephew, quietly removed from the department days earlier, was indicted for misuse of authority and tampering with official complaints. The HOA was dissolved, its funds frozen, its properties seized pending liquidation. As for me, I was awarded damages, $1,200,000 to be paid from HOA reserves and personal restitution. I didn't cheer. I didn't even smile. I just went home. The following week, I posted a new sign at the edge of my property. Simple metal, clean lettering. Not under your jurisdiction. Then I opened a YouTube channel, Lone Wolf Justice. Within days, it had 10,000 subscribers. By month's end, 50. I started filming short episodes on land rights, how to read your deeds, how to fight back when the clipboard crowd comes knocking. People reached out, some just to say thanks, others to ask for help. I gave what I could. I still live alone in the hills, surrounded by the world I built with my own hands. The forest is quiet again. The generators hum. The cameras blink green. And somewhere, far away, I like to think Karen is watching from a small, fluorescent-lit room, wondering how it all went so wrong. I could tell her, but she wouldn't listen.